Okay.
But no, I wouldn't say history overwhelms me. Other things overwhelm me, but not history, no. Because I think if you're not careful, history can be a real weight and an anchor around you.
Globally, viewers were stunned by Buckingham Palace's just seconds ago. An official statement was released. The words were succinct, icy, and terrible. However, there is a reality hidden beneath them that has the power to change the monarchy's trajectory. Regarding Prince William, this was not merely news for the general public. It was so intimate. There had been an incident, something that the palace had made a last-ditch effort to hide. Prior to delving further into, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates on what this actually means for the royal family. The early dawn started in London just like any other. Hovering over Buckingham Palace was a grey sky. As usual, the media set up camp outside and royal observers using their phones to browse through updates. However, upon the palace's official announcement, the world froze. It was not the customary diplomatic ambiguity or refined optimism. It was astute, methodical, and contained a sadness that no reporter, no matter how experienced, could hide. Specifics were not mentioned in the statement. However, its tone implied that the family had experienced an irrevocable event, and everyone's attention was immediately drawn to Prince William. In a few minutes, the BBC broadcaster stopped in the middle of her sentence, overcome by feeling. As she read the statement's final words, which alluded to loss, cameras caught her shaking hands. Irreparable. Banners that said "Palace" flickered on televisions around the United Kingdom. Verifies bad news. In the era of modern technology, rumors proliferate like wildfire. In a matter of seconds, social media exploded. As thousands of people conjectured about Prince William, the word started to trend worldwide. What might have gone wrong? Was it a health issue? Was it a death in the family? Also, was it anything far more sinister? Layers of royal secrecy conceal a truth. In the meantime, a picture of Catherine in Kensington Palace appeared online. The Princess of Wales departing the property, what no words could pale, disturbed, and visibly holding back. Tears, that one frame turned into the visual pulse of the general terror of the country. Whispers increased in volume inside the palace. A few noted that the statement's wording had the king's signature and gestured to King Charles's private office. Formal, restrained, and intensely intimate manner. Others observed that it had eschewed the communications team completely and the customary channels. It came directly from the top, and that in and of itself said a lot. Within the royal family, something had shifted overnight. Hierarchy and even the courtiers, who took great pleasure in their discretion, were uneasy. Workers noted the strange silence that pervaded the hallways, broken only by the sporadic sound of whispered words and hasty footsteps. Outside reporters continued to speculate, but the palace maintained the statement continued that it remained silent out of respect for the family, leaving everyone to understand the meaning of respect. But it wasn't an interpretation for Prince William, it was conflict. He was aware of what had just come to light and that it would change his life. Eternally, he allegedly stood in shock behind the royal gates, rereading the words that verified the disaster for which he had begged would be kept confidential. The monarchy was established after centuries of stoic endurance, now encountered a surge of public sympathy, not for the monarchy, but for the man underneath it. William was no longer merely the heir, he was the bereaved son, the center of a shattered empire. The sorrow had penetrated titles, ceremonies, and the armor of the actual royal obligation. And as everyone looked for solutions, those closest to the family was aware of one thing. This was just the start of something far deeper. As the world attempts to understand, whispers start to emerge from the palace's hazy but ominous statements, pointing to anything much more intimate than is ever permitted by royal procedure. A private meeting was held hours before the public announcement. Only senior royals and a small group of others attended the event inside Balmoral. Helps. According to insiders, the atmosphere was oppressive and gloomy. They cried tears. A single decision to ultimately reveal the truth was made as tempers erupted. However, what was the truth? Terrible that not even the heir apparent could get ready for it. Behind the royal estate's opulence, the atmosphere was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Cars came in silence as the mist of the early morning hovered over Balmoral. Their residents are too nervous to talk. What had been discussed was so serious inside the conference room that even the family's stoic members were clearly shaken. At the head of the long wood table was King Charles, surrounded by his closest advisors and Princess Anne. Normally serene, his eyes weary and red, they were calculated. Hours ago, he received news that wasn't just related to his health or politics. It was an attack on the basic basis of the monarchy. For as long as he could, he had held it. However, there was no longer any room for secrecy. The encounter was later described by witnesses as the darkest dawn since Diana. The weight of history was in every word that was said. Every pause was a cry of unsaid suffering. Charles apparently found it difficult to control himself, losing his cool as Anne rested a firm hand on his shoulder. People who I heard her say something in a whisper about responsibility and how to face the truth with dignity. However, even Anne, renowned for her unwavering determination, was observed subtly rubbing her eyes. This was not merely a political emergency. It was a family collapsing due to the intolerable pressure of a long-suppressed reality. William the Prince had already been informed. One of them delivered the message discreetly and out of sight, his father's dependable assistance. According to people close to the family, he remained still for a few minutes after hearing the news that is divided between shock and fear. His quiet had more impact than any outburst might have been. He whispered a single sentence, according to those close to him, beneath his breath. This was not how it was meant to end. In an attempt to palace, employees were instructed to remain completely silent in order to contain what was about to happen. Doors were locked and confiscated. The royal press office was told to postpone all correspondence with outside parties until the word came from Charles. Several reigning courtiers acknowledged that they had never witnessed such a coordinated terror. One compared it as a kingdom that is holding its breath. Another stated, "When the king weeps, Britain trembles." However, in the midst of the tumult, one word at the conclusion of an era, it started to circulate among the palace insiders. It was more than a metaphor. It was an acknowledgement that an irreversible event had taken place. Those who had spent decades protecting royal secrets realized that this would not remain undiscovered indefinitely. The decision to go public was motivated by inevitability rather than strategy. However, they were unable to foresee the impact it would have on both Prince William and the country. Since as the statement was about to be released, quarters were writing the words that would shortly startle the globe. Eerie awareness that a catastrophe shrouded in royal silence was about to recur. However, to comprehend why Prince William was devastated by this moment, we must return to the quiet events that transpired over the behind locked royal doors for the previous few weeks. Few were aware that a few days prior, William had secretly traveled north. The declaration, it was supposed to be a secret farewell. What transpired during that visit explains the entire expression of sadness on his face today. He was broken by neither duty nor politics. It was love and the anguish of knowing it was too late. During the peaceful days, one convoy left London in total secrecy before the palace's announcement. There were not any press conferences, no cameras, and no planned appearances. Few aides were aware that Prince William had arrived to Balmoral, the location that had come to represent both family harmony and intolerable loss in the history of royalty. It was a journey motivated more by passion than by obligation. Before phrases like an official declaration and public grieving were taken away, the son's natural desire to see his father again removed the humanity concealed under the crown. The visit lasted less than 5 hours, according to insiders. However, in that little period, something significant happened. Those in attendance spoke of a moment that was both solemn and sacred. The pair, after years of silence and hope, two men, a father and a son, finally spoke without the burden of cameras or advisors. They weren't king and heir for the first time in decades. However, Charles and William are only two men facing the same reality. Neither was able to get away. Later, witnesses disclosed that William came out of that chamber looking pale and wobbly, as if the weight of his burden had suddenly increased. The few people who were present at Balmoral that day started spreading rumors. Some said they heard bits and pieces of forgive, legacy, and promise, repeated in a whispered conversation tones. Others said that despite his voice trembling, Charles had attempted to grin despite his discomfort and declare he was all right. At first, William reportedly refused to go, remaining seated next to the bed long after the formalities were over. When he was once heard whispering, "He's fading faster than they'll admit." Once written off as emotional tiredness, they now bear the burden of disastrous foresight. Prior to his departure, William did anything quite intimate. According to people close to the royal family, he put a little folded piece of paper on the bedside table, a move on which even the palace has declined to comment. What was written on it is still unknown, but for those who saw it, its implication was fairly obvious. It was his silent farewell to a son's message that no royal proclamation, no news release, and no statement could ever be the same. When he eventually got up to go, they had a silent agreement and acknowledged that this might be the last time they looked at each other. Nobody was around. It was said to be a silent trip home. An explanation of aides as the automobile headed south, William stared unresponsively out the window. He was provided no guidance, no inquiries, and no words. When he arrived in London, the man who had departed as a prince has come back as someone transformed, bearing the last secret that would eventually shatter a country's heart. Before the world fell apart, his visit would be his final peaceful moment, prior to the public learning the truth amid a whirlwind of grief and conjecture. At last, the palace broke its silence. Few anticipated the subsequent disclosure. One handwritten annotation was included in the official document from Charles the King. The letter was neither ceremonial nor political. It was specifically directed to his oldest son. It is the most eerie royal message ever written, according to those who have read it. A dad inquiring his son for courage and forgiveness. The palace had stated for days nothing. Curtis avoided making eye contact. Every official statement was delayed, and no one answered the phones. Justification. Suddenly, a sealed document bearing the king's seal was made public by the royal press office. Insignia. In contrast to the typical statements made in public by advisors, this was distinct. Charles's signature and shaky but recognizable handwriting were on the note, verifying its legitimacy. It was a graceful and regretful farewell, the last words of a ruler facing mortality as well as legacy. The first line of the note broke through all the layers of royal formality. "My dear William, please pardon me for giving up the throne that was rightfully yours for years. It was unvarnished, human, and horribly truthful." The monarch acknowledged that he had been on duty for too long. Above love, and that the cost had been incurred not in politics, but in the separation between a son and his father. There were sections that alluded to Queen Elizabeth's last desires, as though Charles had brought her spectral counsel into his rule. He noted that although he had made an effort to meet her expectations, that what little he had left had been devoured somewhere along the line by the weight of the throne. When William, Prince sources said that after reading the note, he broke totally. The man who was renowned for his strength and poise all of a sudden crumbled due to a reality that was too intimate for the cameras to record. He is described by others who were present, holding onto the letter as though letting it go would result in his father's death twice. It was reported that Catherine would not leave his side. Over his shoulder, she read the words, tears streaming down her cheeks. "As his father has at last achieved serenity," she muttered. The potential heir of the royal family in that private moment wasn't a public figure or a prince. He was only a son lamenting his father, had misinterpreted and loved. The letter's wording left little room for doubt, even though it didn't specifically mention disease. "Time grows short. I can feel the silence approaching," and other such phrases were sufficient to start a storm of conjecture both inside and outside of Britain. The stillness in the palace had finally broken, But the reality that surfaced was more excruciating than anyone could have predicted. For the general audience, the letter was a revelation. It was an ending that would shape William's life going forward. However, when the message spreads inside, another piece of the puzzle appears in the royal passageways. Something concealed in a medical file rather than a letter behind the lock and key. One confidential medical file turned into the center of a frantic cover-up at the palace. Senior employees had battled for weeks to maintain its contents from getting to the media, but now it's obvious why. The reality is it would change the future of the monarchy in addition to destroying the royal family. Additionally, for Prince, it wasn't only the crown, William. It was about the premature death of his father. Control had been subtly replaced by pandemonium behind the massive doors of Buckingham Palace. The reality that nobody wanted the world to know was contained in a document that was sealed, restricted, and shielded by legal privilege. Understand, Princess Anne and Prince William were two of the few people who had witnessed it. The report was its clarity is clinical, icy, and ruthless. It validated what Charles had attempted to conceal, an advanced stage disease, through pure determination, one that even the greatest medical minds in Britain were unable to slow down any longer. In actuality, time was no longer expressed in years, but weeks. Weeks before the information was made public, the family had received a discreet warning from the doctors. It was Anne, who sobbed silently after learning the diagnosis for the first time. She had witnessed her brother overcome hardship all of his life, but even his iron will was unable to prevail in this conflict. When after hearing the news, William remained silent for a few minutes. As the world waits for the next official word from Buckingham Palace, one thing has become clear: the future of the monarchy is standing at a crossroads. For Prince William, this moment is not just about duty or the crown. It is about loss, responsibility, and stepping into a role that history has prepared him for, but no son is ever truly ready to face. The silence from the palace may continue for now, but the truth behind these walls will eventually emerge. And when it does, it could reshape the royal family forever. What really lies ahead for Prince William and the British monarchy? Only time will reveal the full story. If you want to stay updated on every new development surrounding the royal family, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next update. Thank you for watching.